We're embarking on a deep dive into some really timeless biblical wisdom. Specifically, we're looking at the multifaceted identity of a woman of faith. Because the world, as we all know, it just bombards us with these external metrics, doesn't it? Beauty standards, career goals, social status, just endless lists of things we should achieve. But what if there's a totally different way to measure worth? A spiritual blueprint, maybe, for impact that just transcends all of that.
Exactly. A much deeper, more lasting standard.
We're talking about a woman of faith who, in the deepest sense, isn't defined by whatever culture says is important this week. Our source material, particularly the Bible, it describes her not just as, well, an individual, but sometimes as a warrior in the spirit or a builder of nations, and fundamentally a woman after God's own heart.
And those aren't just nice-sounding phrases, are they? They point to something very real, very powerful.
Absolutely. They describe a transformative reality, one that can really redefine how you think about strength, about purpose, and influence. So we're going to unpack 7 key traits today. And these traits will hopefully inspire you, but honestly, they might also challenge you, really push you to step into the fullness of your God-given destiny.
And when we say God-given destiny, it's not like some rigid script you have to follow.
No,
right?
not at all. It's more about the unique gifts, the talents, the callings God has intentionally placed within you. Things designed to be activated for His purposes and, for the good of the world around you.
It's a call to something bigger, something eternal.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Our mission today, it's really rooted in that timeless wisdom. Proverbs 31, verse 30, it gives us this foundational truth. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised.
That really shifts the focus, doesn't it? From the outside to the inside.
Exactly. From the temporary to the eternal. So we're here to distill and explore 7 key traits that mark a woman truly devoted to God, drawing insights straight from the scriptures. And, importantly, we'll explore how you can begin to walk in them. Like starting right now in your own life. This isn't just theory, it's meant to be a practical blueprint for, real spiritual growth and lasting impact.
And that's precisely the journey we want to invite you on today, this deep dive. It isn't just about, grasping concepts intellectually or knowing about these traits. Our goal is for you to really internalize them, let them resonate deep down, and then, crucially, see how they can be applied, how they can be embodied in your everyday life.
Right, moving beyond just a surface understanding.
Yes. We want to provide a comprehensive, kind of nuanced look at what true devotion really means for a woman based on these profound biblical examples and teachings. It's about moving from just knowing about these things to genuinely living them out, transforming your whole approach to faith and really to life itself. It's a thoughtful exploration, hopefully one that equips and empowers you.
Okay, let's start with the foundation, the cornerstone, really. Trait number 1, unshakable faith. Now, when we talk about this, we're definitely not thinking of some kind of passive, detached belief. It's more like an active, dynamic trust in God that holds firm, even when, life feels like a storm.
Faith that doesn't just survive the hard times, but actually gets stronger through them.
Exactly, like a muscle growing with resistance. And our source material, it points to incredible examples. Today, we're diving into the story of Hannah. You find it in 1 Samuel chapter 1 and Hannah's story.
Gosh, it's just so relatable. If you've ever faced deep disappointment or unfulfilled longings or just a really long season of waiting.
So true. She desperately wanted a child, right? And faced years of barrenness.
Yes, and in her culture, that carried immense shame, deep sorrow. And to make it worse, her husband, Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, she had children and apparently often taunted Hannah, really twisted the knife.
Oh, that's brutal. Just constant emotional pain and public humiliation, too. Year after year, yet in the middle of all that deep sorrow, the Bible tells us she poured her heart out to God, fervently, at the tabernacle in Shiloh.
And it wasn't just a polite prayer request, was it?
Not at all. She was expressing her deepest pain, her rawest emotions, that soul-crushing disappointment, directly to God, weeping bitterly, it says, but she absolutely refused to let that profound disappointment destroy her hope. And that is such a powerful example of unshakable faith. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think. What does unshakable actually mean here? Does it mean you never doubt, never feel despair?
That's a great question.
Or is it maybe more about persevering through the doubt, clinging to God even when your feelings are screaming something else? And how does faith actually grow in trials instead of just, shriveling up?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is exactly what you pointed out earlier, that active, proactive nature of Hannah's faith. It wasn't passive acceptance. It wasn't just stoic endurance. She wasn't just feeling bad. She acted on her faith. She took her anguish, her deepest desires, straight to the one she trusted. That's not just surviving. That's an engaged, courageous wrestling in prayer.
Oh, wrestling. I like that.
And when we talk about faith growing in trials, it's profound. Think about a tree in a drought. The roots have to go deeper, spread wider, right? Searching for water. The struggle doesn't kill it. It makes it stronger, more anchored.
Good analogy.
Just similar with our faith. Adversity doesn't just test it. It challenges it to go deeper, to rely more fully on God's character, not just on, easy circumstances or quick answers.
So the trials aren't necessarily roadblocks.
Often, no. They could be catalysts. Catalysts to refine us, purify us, deepen our trust. They push us past our own strength, our own understanding, into this place of absolute reliance on God's sovereignty and goodness.
Okay, so how can someone listening cultivate that kind of active, growing faith in their own storms? Because we all have them.
Well, you can start by being honest with God, just like Hannah. Don't hold back the disappointment, the fear, the frustration. Lay it all out there. Then, consciously choose to release it into His hands, trusting He hears, trusting His timing, His plan, even when you can't see the way forward.
So it's that pouring out, but also that refusal to let disappointment win.
Exactly. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing conscious choice, moment by moment sometimes. And that builds resilience.
That makes so much sense, that distinction between active engagement and just passive endurance.
Yeah. And that leads us perfectly into the second trait, which is so closely linked, a heart of prayer. And again, this isn't just about, saying grace before meals or only praying when there's a crisis. It's about cultivating constant, living communication with God, intercession. That verse in Luke comes to mind, doesn't it? Luke 18:1. Always pray and not give up.
Precisely. For a devoted woman, prayer isn't the last resort after she's tried everything else. It's her primary weapon, her first line of defense. Let's really unpack the breadth of this, though. The source material emphasizes interceding not just for family and church, which are good, obviously, but also for enemies.
Wow. Yeah, that's a tough one for many people.
Right, especially when the world tells you to retaliate or hold on to grudges. So what does it really mean for prayer to be your first weapon? How does that shift in mindset change how you approach conflict or uncertainty or just relationships, even the difficult ones?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the strategic significance is just immense. When prayer is your first weapon, it signals a profound shift. You're relying on God from the start.
Yeah.
You're consciously inviting His power, His wisdom into every single situation right from the beginning, instead of trying to fix it yourself and only turning to Him when you're desperate.
So it moves from self-reliance to God-reliance.
Absolutely. Acknowledging His sovereignty in everything and praying for enemies. That's maybe one of the deepest demonstrations of spiritual strength and maturity there is.
Because it forces you to set aside your own feelings.
Exactly. You set aside the personal grievances, the bitterness, the desire for payback. You actively choose to seek God's best, His redemption, for someone who's hurt you or opposes you. And that act of love and forgiveness, it doesn't just potentially help them. It powerfully breaks the hold of bitterness in your own heart. It aligns you with God's way of doing things.
Okay, so what about that phrase, always pray? Does that mean literally praying 247?
Probably not practical, though consistent, dedicated prayer time is definitely vital. But always pray speaks more to cultivating a continuous mindset of communication with God.
The ongoing conversation.
Yeah, exactly. A conscious awareness of His presence throughout your day, a readiness to bring everything to Him, big or small.
Like those short arrow prayers you sometimes hear about.
Precisely. A quick thank you for something beautiful, a quick plea for guidance in a decision, a silent prayer for someone you pass on the street, even just a sigh offered to God when you're overwhelmed. It's building that habit of communion, making God your closest confidant.
So for someone listening, how do they shift from prayer as a last resort to that first line of defense?
It starts by recognizing prayer isn't just for emergencies. It's for every aspect of life. It's proactive, it's preventative, it's relational. And praying without giving up, even when answers seem slow, that requires cultivating patience, spiritual perseverance, trusting God's working behind the scenes in ways we often can't see, and that His timing is perfect.
That kind of persistent prayer must build incredible resilience.
It really does. And fosters a much deeper, more intimate relationship with Him over time.
That's a beautiful picture of what that relationship can look like. Okay, moving from these inner foundations, faith and prayer, let's look at how this devotion shows up outwardly. Trait number 3 is courage in the face of fear. And again, this isn't about not feeling fear. That's often impossible, right?
Very human to feel fear.
It's about a willingness to step forward anyway, even when it costs you personally. Prioritizing obedience to God over what people think, no matter the consequences. And the source material gives us such an iconic example. Esther.
Oh, yes. Queen Esther, an incredible story.
Incredible bravery. Here's this young Jewish orphan who becomes queen in Persia. Then this wicked official, Haman, plots to kill all her people. Her relative, Mordecai, urges her to go to the king to intercede. But you couldn't just walk in on the king uninvited.
Right. That was punishable by death, wasn't it? Unless he held out his scepter.
Exactly. A huge risk, even for the queen. Imagine the fear she must have felt. Her life, her people's lives, all hanging in the balance. And in that moment, she says those famous words, "If I perish, I perish."
Chilling, isn't it? Such resolve.
It wasn't bravado, it was a terrifying commitment, acknowledging the cost but choosing obedience anyway, putting everything on the line for God's people and his plan. So what kind of fears do we face today that might require that level of courage? Maybe not always literal death.
No, but maybe social death, reputational damage, losing comfort, security, economic stability. Those fears are very real for people.
Yeah. And how do we figure out God's will when it feels so counterintuitive, or when it clashes so strongly with wanting people's approval or just going along with the crowd?
Well, this really gets to the heart of true courage, doesn't it? Like you
Yeah.
said, it's not the absence of fear. Esther was afraid. Anyone would be. True courage is acting despite the fear, making that conscious, sometimes gut-wrenching choice to obey, even when everything inside you wants to run, play it safe, just blend in.
So applying that today, what might that look like?
Well, in our daily lives, maybe it's speaking up against an injustice at work, even if it's unpopular, standing firm on a moral principle everyone else is compromising on. Or maybe choosing a career path that seems less glamorous but feels like God's calling. Or extending grace when the world says get even. Those are the modern risks requiring spiritual courage.
And how do we build up that kind of courage? It doesn't just appear overnight, does it?
Usually not. It's often built incrementally, through smaller, consistent acts of obedience. When you choose truth over an easy lie, or forgiveness over a grudge, or you defend someone being treated unfairly, you're strengthening that spiritual muscle, building a track record of trusting God even when it's uncomfortable.
So small acts build capacity for bigger ones.
Exactly. And cultivating that conviction to put God's will first. That involves spending consistent time in His Word, seeking Him in prayer, and being part of a faith community, mentors, friends, church, who encourage that growth.
Right, surrounding yourself with support.
It helps you develop that internal compass where God's approval becomes the ultimate validation, more important than any human praise or criticism.
So for you listening, where might you be called to step forward, even if it feels risky right now?
It could be a tough conversation, setting a needed boundary, upholding a conviction publicly. What small act of courage could you take today, trusting God with how it turns out?
That framing acting despite fear, not without fear, is so helpful. It makes courage feel more like a choice we can make, developed over time. Okay, so from that inner strength and an outward courage, let's turn to a trait focused on how we interact with the hurting world. Compassion that heals. And this goes way beyond just sympathy, right? Feeling sorry for someone. True compassion here means actively carrying the burdens of others, extending genuine, transformative compassion to the hurting, the forgotten, the broken.
Actively carrying. That's a powerful image.
And the source material points to that beautiful story in Mark 5. Jesus and the woman with the issue of blood.
Oh, yes. Such a moving encounter.
This poor woman suffered for 12 years with a hemorrhage. Not just physical suffering, but ritual uncleanness under Jewish law back then.
Which meant total social isolation, didn't it? Cut off from family, community, religious life. Couldn't even be touched.
Exactly, and she'd spent all her money on doctors, only getting worse. Her desperation must have been immense. She pushes through the crowd thinking, if I can just touch his clothes. And the moment she does, the bleeding stops.
And Jesus felt the power go out, right? And asked who touched him.
Yes. And she, trembling, confesses. And he doesn't scold her. He meets her desperation with such profound compassion, affirms her faith, declares her well. Healed physically, yes, but also restored socially, emotionally, spiritually.
That restoration is key. It wasn't just fixing the physical problem.
Right. So how does a devoted woman today carry that kind of compassion? Not just for the physically sick, but for those bleeding emotionally, spiritually, socially. And what does healing look like beyond the physical in this context?
Well, what's fascinating is that ripple effect you mentioned. Jesus' compassion didn't just stop the bleeding. It restored her dignity, her identity, her place. True compassion isn't just a fleeting feeling or a sympathetic nod. It's active engagement. It means being willing to be inconvenienced, to really listen, to empathize so deeply you're moved to action.
So it's feeling with someone, not just for them.
Exactly. Feeling with them enough that it stews you to respond. And that often means stepping out of our comfort zones, really seeing people's struggles, not just observing from a distance or scrolling past.
And how can that lead to tangible healing or restoration? Beyond the physical, I mean.
In so many ways. It could be practical help for a struggling family, offering a consistent listening ear to someone grieving or dealing with mental health issues, extending radical forgiveness, advocating for the marginalized. Healing can be emotional restoration from trauma, mending broken relationships, easing crushing loneliness, or even that spiritual awakening that comes from feeling unconditionally loved and accepted.
So how do we identify the hurting, forgotten, and broken around us? They don't always wear a sign.
No, they don't. It means intentionally looking beyond the surface, beyond the curated social media lives. Paying attention to the quiet cries, noticing who gets overlooked or dismissed. Being willing to engage with stories that might make us uncomfortable.
So for you listening, how can you cultivate that kind of heart? One that actively seeks out and responds with compassion.
It starts with prayer, doesn't it? Asking God to open your spiritual eyes, soften your heart to the needs. Then, being truly present when someone shares, listening without judgment, and acting in concrete ways that reflect God's love and the dignity He gives everyone.
These outward acts, courage, compassion, they really flow from deep inner commitments, don't they?
Absolutely, they reinforce each other.
Which brings us to trait number 5, and this one feels like a big challenge today: a commitment to holiness. In a world that often celebrates compromise, kind of blurs moral lines, a devoted woman consciously chooses purity. Heart, mind, body, she fiercely guards her spirit, knowing she carries God's presence within her.
That awareness is key, carrying God's presence.
So what does this mean for us now? What does holiness actually look like in a modern world where norms keep shifting and the pressure is often to just go along? When we talk about prevalent compromises, what are we really talking about? Entertainment, relationships, career choices, even just our private thoughts.
It can touch all those areas, can it?
Yeah. So how do you actively choose and maintain purity in thought and action when everything seems to pull you the other way? It feels like a huge calling, but also maybe a bit daunting. How do you fiercely guard your spirit in a world that's often indifferent or even hostile to holiness?
Well, connecting it back to that bigger picture, the idea of carrying the presence of God, that's truly transformative.
Yeah.
It shifts personal purity from just being about rules to being about sacred stewardship.
Sacred stewardship. I like that.
It means recognizing your body, your mind, your whole being is a temple, a living vessel for God. That awareness doesn't lead to being restrictive and legalistic, but to a deep respect for yourself and for God.
Because every choice reflects on that sacred presence you carry.
Exactly. It's not a burden. It's a privilege, a sacred trust. When you understand you're God's dwelling place, you naturally want to keep that space clean, honorable, aligned with His character. It's your inner sanctuary.
Okay, so practically, what does guarding her spirit fiercely look like day to day?
It means making intentional, ongoing choices. With media, for instance, being really discerning about what you let into your mind and heart. Social media, TV shows, music, news. Recognizing how it all impacts your thoughts, emotions, worldview.
Choosing things that uplift rather than degrade.
Right. Things that align with truth, goodness, beauty, not things that normalize ungodly behavior or values contrary to your faith. In relationships, it means healthy boundaries. Choosing friends who genuinely encourage your walk with God. Avoiding interactions that lead to compromise or, spiritual dilution.
What about thought patterns? That seems like a constant battle.
It is. Scripture talks about taking every thought captive. It means challenging those negative, impure, cynical thoughts when they pop up, consciously replacing them with truth, gratitude, hope, Christ's perspective.
So for you listening, maintaining purity, guarding your spirit, it requires real intentionality.
Huge intentionality, constantly asking yourself, is this choice, this thought, this relationship honoring the sacred presence of God within me? Am I actively protecting my inner sanctuary? And when you do that proactively, you can radiate God's presence more clearly, more authentically to the world.
That's such a powerful way to frame it. Not just rules, but stewardship of the divine presence.
Yeah.
Okay, that leads perfectly into trait 6, servant leadership. Another really countercultural idea, right? The world often says leadership is about power, dominance, authority from the top.
Climbing the ladder.
But Jesus in Matthew 23 flips it completely. The greatest among us will be a servant. So a devoted woman leads not by demanding, but by loving, by building others up, by serving with humility. But how is loving a form of leadership? It sounds almost gentle, maybe too passive for how we normally think of leadership.
It sounds gentle, but its impact is incredibly powerful, often more so than top-down authority.
Okay. And what are concrete, everyday ways we can actually build others up? At home, at work, in our communities? More than just being nice, right?
Oh, definitely more than just being nice. It's about intentional, growth-focused interactions that empower people. And this really highlights that countercultural nature of servant leadership you mentioned. In a world focused on self-promotion, hierarchy, individual glory, servant leadership is just different.
So leading by loving means what exactly?
It means genuinely prioritizing the well-being, the growth, the flourishing of the people you lead or influence. It's about empathy, deep listening, understanding needs, responding with real care, even self-sacrifice.
That doesn't sound passive at all.
Not at all. It's intensely active in its devotion to others. And it fosters incredible trust, loyalty, and an environment where people feel valued and empowered to give their best, not because they have to, but because they're inspired to.
What's the difference between just serving someone and leading through service?
That's a great distinction. Simply serving is valuable, of course. But servant leadership implies influence, a guiding presence that elevates and empowers others through your actions and attitude. It's using whatever position you have, parent, mentor, colleague, friend, volunteer to lift others, create pathways for them, champion their potential.
And humility plays a big role here. It doesn't diminish leadership.
Quite the opposite. Humility empowers it. A humble leader knows their limits, learns from anyone, gives credit freely, and is willing to work alongside people, not just direct them. That selflessness builds incredibly strong teams and has a huge positive ripple effect.
So for you listening, how can you practice this?
Look for opportunities everywhere to love, build, serve with humility. Really listen to a colleague. Write a genuine thank you note to someone overlooked. Consistently help out a neighbor in need. Every act of humble, loving service is powerful leadership in God's kingdom.
It really is about making a difference from the ground up, isn't it? With genuine care. Recognizing true power comes from lifting others. And that idea of building up, serving, it flows beautifully into our final trait, number 7, which has this incredibly broad, eternal scope, a legacy of faith. This isn't just about your own lifetime, it's about thinking generationally. Consciously leaving a spiritual inheritance through your prayers, your example, your enduring faith for those who come after you.
Thinking generationally, that's a big concept.
It really is. Here's where it gets really interesting. What does that truly mean? Most of us are focused on today, maybe planning a few years ahead. This calls us to consider decades, maybe centuries, of spiritual impact. How do intangible things like prayers and our example become a concrete spiritual inheritance? Our source mentions Lois and Eunice, Timothy's grandmother and mother, from 2 Timothy.
Right, their sincere faith was passed down.
Exactly. It wasn't money. It was this deep, real transfer of conviction, values, devotion. So how do we actively create that kind of legacy, especially when the future feels so uncertain?
Well, what's fascinating is that long-term vision. Thinking generationally means consciously considering the spiritual well-being of those who follow biological descendants, spiritual children you mentor, anyone you influence. It's understanding your actions today ripple into the future. Lois and Eunice's faith wasn't just private, it was lived out, taught, modeled, prayed over. That consistent, authentic example, plus their prayers, created an environment for Timothy where faith was tangible, compelling, deeply rooted. It was a legacy built on relationship.
So how do prayers and examples actually translate into an inheritance?
They shape values, instill truth, build spiritual resilience, create a framework for understanding and knowing God. When you pray consistently for your kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, your community, you're actively participating in God's work in their lives, often long before you see results. And your example, how you live out your faith authentically, your integrity, your love, your perseverance that speaks louder than words. It's not about being perfect.
Thank goodness.
Right. It's about authenticity, consistency, humble reliance on God. Listeners can build this legacy through daily life, not just grand gestures. Reading scripture with family, having honest conversations about faith and doubt, living with integrity at work, forgiving others, serving without needing recognition, sharing your own story of God's faithfulness.
So every time you choose faith over fear or service over self,
you're writing a chapter in that spiritual inheritance.
Yeah.
For you, the listener, reflect deeply. What kind of spiritual legacy do you want to leave? How can your prayers, your example, impact those who come after, even those you might never meet?
Wow. What an incredible perspective to end on. Thinking about how our lives today echo through generations, it's inspiring. Gives our daily choices so much more weight. So we've unpacked these 7 traits: unshakable faith, heart of prayer, courage in the face of fear, compassion that heals, a commitment to holiness, servant leadership, and finally, a legacy of faith. And when you put them all together, it's so clear. A devoted woman is far more than titles or roles or achievements. She is really a reflection of Jesus to the world, embodying his character, his purposes. And the beautiful thing is that this isn't some impossible ideal for just a few super spiritual people. These traits are truly for every woman who just looks up and says, "Lord, here I am, use me."
Which raises a really important personal question for you, our listener, to maybe ponder this week. As you've heard about these 7 traits, which one resonates most strongly with you right now? Which one feels like the most pressing invitation for growth in your current season? Is it cultivating that unshakable faith, deepening your prayer life, finding courage, extending compassion, or maybe recommitting to holiness, embracing servant leadership, or starting to consciously build that legacy of faith? How might embracing even one of these more fully, starting today, begin to transform your own journey and your impact on the world around you? How might it help you radiate God's presence even more?
It's a powerful challenge, isn't it? But also a beautiful invitation. We really encourage you, maybe share this deep dive with another woman in your life, someone who exemplifies these traits, or maybe someone who just be inspired by this conversation, because this journey of faith and devotion, it's always ongoing, always expanding, and we're all in it together, called to reflect his light.